Hey there, folks. Happy holidays, happy weekend, whatever it winds up being by the time you see this. I wanted to do a quick update based on the fact that Wizard of the Coast has responded to the OpenDnD trending topic with some information about the open game license going forward, relevant to our last video, so I thought it was worth following up. I don't have an enormous amount of time to do a big production video this week. It's holidays coming down. I'm in end of the year crunch with other work, and here we are. But I didn't want to just leave this hanging out there while we go into the new year either. So the short version is it's kind of a good news, bad news situation, in my opinion, and this is all, we'll get this out of the way, all speculation, my opinion, commentary, allegedly, etc., etc., etc. I don't know anything, and I'm not here to represent that I do. I'm here to give you the best informed opinion that I can, because I think this is an important topic for somewhat myself, but also a number of other creators that I've met through this community who could be very heavily impacted if things go kind of the darker timeline route. So Wizards came out and said that there will be an open game license for Dungeons and Dragons, or OneDnD going forward. But that it will be changing from the open game license that has been in place for the past, I think, 10, 15 years. I'm not sure, don't quote me on that, but it has been in place unchanged and in perpetuity, royalty-free, etc., for quite a while, under which a number of businesses, including not only my own, but some that you may have actually heard of, like Hit Point Press, Kobold Press, Green Ronin Gaming, I think that's the right name, even the Critical Role books, Tal'Dorei Reborn, all that kind of stuff. Grim Hollow is one of my favorites that I've used quite a bit at my own table. A bunch of any D&D Kickstarter effectively exists under the open game license. As I got into a little bit in my last video, there's a difference between the open game license, the SRD, the DM's Guild, fan content, and some other nuanced categories within there. That gets conflated a lot in abbreviated online discussions. I just wanted to point that out once again. There's differences between all of these categories, what you can do with them as a business, what you can do with them as an individual, how they affect your relationship with Wizards of the Coast or Dungeons & Dragons or the system or the Forgotten Realms or the lore or any of that. Different buckets. This is about the OGL. Moving on. There's kind of four main points to get into here that are changing going forward, aside from the fact that the open license is actually changing. We're going to run through them real quick, and then I'm going to back up and explain kind of what each one means in the context of the creator community, the third-party space. The first new thing is that it looks like, based on my reading of this statement, that the Open Game License 1.1 and onward are going to require some form of affirmative response, instead of just being an open license that is put out into the world without a back and forth. Wizard sounds like they're going to be setting up some sort of portal or mechanism for a business to register their project effectively and accept the license with an affirmative signature or response of some kind. Basically saying, I have received your license, I agree to abide by the terms herein, here's what I'm doing. That is all kind of packaged under point 1 in their statement. The next thing that we're going to put a pin in is that any OGL-derived income exceeding $50,000 in revenue, not profit, but revenue, will be required under this license to be reported back to Wizards year over year. That's more significant than I think people are giving it credit for. I know $50,000 seems like a lot, and most indie creations never approach that. Like I said, put a pin in it. We're going to come back to that in a minute. Third point, including a creator badge on OGL-derived work, I honestly could care less. As long as it's not something super obnoxious. If it says, like, Wizards Official or Wizards Unofficial Creator, blah, 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 stick it on the cover. I don't care, and I don't think most people will either. Whatever. And the fourth thing, which I suspect is stuck in there a little bit as a lightning rod or a red herring to get the majority of the discussion or to diffuse some potential criticism, if I want to be really cynical about it, is that the small minority of creators under the open game license who are earning more than $750,000 in revenue, they claim it's less than 20 projects. I don't actually know where they got that number, and I don't care. I'll take it at face value. So less than 20. The small number of them earning over that $750,000 mark, presumably in revenue, not profit again, will be required to pay royalties to Wizards of the Coast based on that work. All right. On its face, not really that big a deal. Like I said, it's a very small amount, and if you're making $750 million, one presumes that as long as the percentage is not crazy, who cares? What I think is interesting is that that number is taking up a lot of discussion on this topic because, it runs the gamut from, if you're making that much money, why shouldn't you pay Wizards? Which I get the argument there, that's fine. Or that's never going to be you anyways. I certainly never expect to make anything even close to that. I'm not even sure we'll hit 50,000, frankly, even if Cinders had gone forward completely unmolested by any of this. However, what I think the 750 number actually is a Pathfinder kill. So for those who don't know the history of Paizo, I think it's Paizo, I'm not sure, whatever. The history of Paizo's Pathfinder is actually interesting and somewhat relevant to this. Back in the day, they used to make Dungeons & Dragons content exclusively, that was their business, I don't know if it was exclusive, they might have done other systems too, but they used to make Dungeons & Dragons content for 3rd edition and earlier. The last time Wizards of the Coast decided to crack down on the third-party space was going from 3E and maybe 3.5 to 4th edition. They got rid of the open game license and kind of had this not very well-received sort of predatory replacement affiliate type program. And Paizo at the time said, screw you guys, I'm going home. And split off under a previous version of the Open Game License, 1.0A. I actually talked to their Twitter the other day and confirmed that. 1.0A, which is derived from 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons, and made their own separate system that was derived from it. So if you've ever wondered why Pathfinder is so similar to 3rd edition, now obviously they're on to 2nd edition Pathfinder and Starfinder and all this other stuff, so it's evolved quite a bit since then. But if you've ever wondered why Pathfinder 1 was so similar, that's why, because it was actually from the same root source. Wizards, in trying to crack down on the third-party space, actually wound up creating one of their biggest competitors. Biggest competitors with a caveat, by the numbers that I could find, Paizo's annual revenue is somewhere around 15 to 30 million, depending on where you're getting sources from. Wizards of the Coast's tabletop division earned over $900 million in revenue last year. So, they're not like peers, it's kind of that, but I think they're the next biggest. Anyways, that's one of the reasons I think these issues are important, is because Wizards is by far the 300,000 million pound gorilla in the room. 800 pound gorilla is the phrase, I got it wrong, shut up. It's the 800 pound gorilla in the room, and where they go, a lot of the market winds up following. Even if you don't like Wizards or engage with their content, it's important to see what the big swinging thing is doing. I'm not monetized. I don't know why I censor it. Anyway, so that $750,000 threshold, I think, is just there in case another big entity like Paizo back in the day decides they're displeased with Wizards at some point in the future. Either OneDnD or even beyond that. Maybe, hypothetically, if Critical Role and Wizards of the Coast got into a spat about something, who knows? And Critical Role said, no, actually, we're going to just split off and go our own way. We've got Darrington Press now. We're going to make our own Darrington Press system. Wizards could say, all right, great, we're going to bill you. And it's kind of just this built-in landmine that prevents another Pathfinder from happening. Argue amongst yourselves the ethics of that. There's certainly an argument to be made from the capitalist perspective of it's our thing, why shouldn't we do that? I would counter with, again, the Critical Role example. Critical Role was originally a Pathfinder campaign that was adapted to 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons and became this whole big thing. But if some of these more restrictive practices had been in place back then, there's an argument to be made that it would have smothered a business like Critical Role before it got anywhere. My argument is that an open system, it encourages businesses like that to exist, which then bring in a lot more people into the space. I would say Critical Role has more than made its money, whatever it took from Wizards, in just new users, new people, new fans, new interests, new products, etc. I think it's self-destructive to kind of limit that thing before it can go anywhere. But I'm not a corporate executive, so whatever, you do you. Anyways, that's a $750,000 thing. I a little bit think that's put in here to make indies think that the rest of this doesn't apply to us, because none of us aspire to make that much money. I mean, it'd be great, but it's not going to happen, let's be real. But let's look at the other stuff. The creator badge, like I said, I could care less. Let's back up to the $50,000 revenue reporting mechanism. That is actually extremely interesting. So again, $50,000 is an enormous amount of money, which most creators I know don't really aspire to make that, not in a year anyways. I certainly know some. I know a couple of map makers who make $45,000 a month based on their Patreon. Arguably, actually not arguably, that doesn't fall under the OGL, but like there is that amount of money floating around in the space potentially for third parties to make on different stuff. But, you know, your mileage will vary. What's really interesting about this is there's a difference between revenue and profit, like I said. $50,000 in profit is a really quite successful personal or small business. $50,000 in revenue would be triggered by a lot of Dungeons & Dragons Kickstarter projects before they had launched, sold a single project, or made a dime in actual profit. That's really interesting. So, what we have now is a system where year over year, Wizards of the Coast is getting revenue reports from all of these projects after launch, which would normally have remained as a private small business and never had to report their income in any sort of public forum. To me, that screams data mining. Could be wrong, I don't know. But to me, what that sounds like is you guys put out all these different things that we don't take a business risk on, but we want the numbers so we know what succeeds so we can decide what our next project's on. And if it happens to be a close competitor to what you were doing and it pushes you out of the space, tough cookies. Again, $50,000 I know seems like an enormous amount of money to a lot of us, myself included. Wildest dreams territory for a D&D derivative project there. But potentially still an extremely destructive thing to some of the bigger creators, some of the small to medium-sized businesses with successful Kickstarters. I mean, I talk to people every day on Twitter and in our chat groups and whatever who have made more than that off of a Kickstarter or a crowdfund or whatever to push their project forward one time. And now they're in this bracket where Wizards of the Coast has this eye on top of them and can swoop in and crush them with vastly superior resources at any point if they get too successful. I find that irksome, and it's something that would be a strong deterrent for me going into that space. We'll see what the final contract says. Which brings me back to the affirmative signatory aspect, that point one where instead of just having an open license out there, I have to go to Wizards, tell them exactly what I'm doing, and sign on the dotted line. That's important not because it affects how the contract works, but because it means that the contract can be changed over time. And my experience with the open game license in, let's say, January of 2023, if they put it out right at the New Year's, I think it'll be later, but whatever, might be different than your experience launching a similar project a year from now, 6 months from now, whatever. They can now monitor it more closely, especially with that revenue reporting function built into the license. Now they can monitor what's happening in the space at a much finer granularity and make changes to the contract that benefit them more over time, because when you go to sign the license, you're not going to see 1.1, you're going to see 1.2, and you have to sign and tell them you accept this license, and then you have 1.2, but then 2 years from now you want to do a sequel project, well now it's 1.4. I don't know where that goes from there. This is, again, all speculation. It could just be that this is how they think is legally the best way to do it, and blah, 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 and there's no ill intent, and that'll never happen, and I'm just crazy, I don't know. All very possible. But it's worth noting that that is now a possibility where it wasn't under the previous 5th edition OGL. I also saw some speculation from people saying that a new contract or a future iteration of the contract might include a clause that says, by signing this, I agree that I will no longer create under that previous contract, 5th edition OGL that was royalty-free, worldwide, licensed in perpetuity, blah, 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 and they can't claw that contract back, but they could get you to sign something that says you won't use it anymore? Maybe. I don't know. That's something I would need to consult someone with actual legal expertise on. It's worth keeping an eye out for once the final text is released. So like I said, I don't have a ton of bandwidth this time of year to put out a whole polished song and dance about this kind of thing. If you can't tell, I really have no desire to be a YouTuber or like a public influencer or make TikToks or whatever. I want to draw spaceships and scary monsters and write rules and stuff in a cave and put them out into the world for someone else to go play with and be ignored. That's my happy place. However, I think these issues are important whether you take the optimistic or pessimistic approach to what you think will happen. I think these issues are important because through my work with Hound Song and doing all this other stuff, I've met a lot of creators who are much more heavily impacted and depend on their livelihoods that they get through the space much more than I do. I have other options. I have other businesses. This makes me no money as of right now. I get $40 a month through Patreon. Woo! That's not paying for the website, let alone developing or paying artists or commissioning or anything beyond that. I am lucky enough to be in a position where this can't crush me. I'll go my own way if I have to. I've told bigger companies than Wizards to stick it where the sun don't shine before I used to work for one. But because I'm in that position, I do feel that it's important with the experience that I do have and the knowledge that I do have, which is enough to know I don't know enough. By the way, like I said, if you think this is simple, you're wrong. That I'm confident on. With the knowledge and experience that I do have, I think it is important to use that position to say, hey, this ain't done. That's what I'm saying now. This isn't done. We'll know a lot more when the contract comes out. I hope cooler heads and better hearts prevail, and things go forward into a brand new age of some really awesome content for this game that we all love and enjoy. There, in my opinion, is a huge amount of mutual benefit to working positively and closely to foster a successful, creative, and self-sustaining third-party ecosystem around this game. I think 5th edition proved that. But I do think that depending on how you slice some spreadsheets, that can be viewed as this is money we should have made and you took it. And I'm worried that that's going to become the prevailing wisdom. We'll see. I will say that, by the way, none of this affects my analysis in my last video about thinking that Wizards is going to move towards a walled garden, closed proprietary digital ecosystem and microtransactions and hyper-monetization. I still have enormous concerns over that, even if the OGL issue was put to bed today. That is, for me, the much bigger concern, because I don't appreciate that from an ethical standpoint or a consumer interest standpoint. I think it is ultimately self-destructive for short-term profit. I think it decimates the fandom. I think it takes advantage of people who just want to enjoy something by bilking them for every single dime that they're worth. It's a lot of stuff. I find it gross. You can form your own opinion on that. I won't play with that kind of thing regardless. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. Hopefully it's not as bad as we think, or I think, or it could be. We'll see. I want to leave you with a little bit of a case study here. I pulled up a Reuters article just to confirm my memory was correct on this that was talking about this happening in India, but I have seen this reporting on this from Europe and America and other places in the past, I believe. But I wanted to confirm that I wasn't, Mandela effect making something up here. Amazon has gotten in trouble over the years several times in court. Arguably, I don't think ever enough to deter them from continuing to do it, financially speaking, but has gotten in trouble several times over the years for allowing any vendor onto their marketplace who meets the requirements, putting out their products and selling them through Amazon. Then Amazon takes that marketplace data that they generate based on shopping habits of those customers, competitive customers, and all this other stuff, creates clone products under their own brands, puts them on the marketplace as Amazon's Choice or Amazon Basics or whatever, pushes them to the top of search results and pushes those people who generated the data and the original products out of their marketplace, crushing their business. So when I see you have to register your project with us and tell us how much money you're making year over year forever, there's some alarm bells in my head. I know what data mining looks like. Don't love it. Don't love it. I'm going to close by saying that I don't think every single Wizards of the Coast employee involved in this is just evil and acting in bad faith. I know some of them, actually. I worked in Seattle for many years. The community is not that enormous there in design and R&D and all this other stuff. Like, we crossed paths at events and different things. I've talked to them. I think an enormous percentage of them, honestly, probably want to see this space thrive as much as anybody else. I know they have respect for their creators, for their players. They're passionate about what they do. I've also personally been in a situation where upper management and leadership has let us go forward to try and reassure people. I didn't work for Wizards of the Coast, let me be clear on that. But I've been in a situation where employees were allowed to say, oh, I don't think it's going to be that bad. I don't think it's going to happen. We got all these great ideas. It's going to be great. And then at the 11th hour, management comes in with a snap decision to throw us under the bus with everybody else. I've seen it, I've done it, I've been there, I hated it. It's possible for Wizards of the Coast to be trying to act in good faith and ultimately go a bad direction. That's how corporations work, almost by design. Anyways, this is why I say that I'm going to believe it when I see the final legal document. I will probably retain a lawyer to analyze that if that information isn't forthcoming in the community in and of itself reliably, before I make any decisions on that. If I do, I will share what I find through that process with everybody else. Okay, that's enough out of me. Happy holidays. Enjoy the end of your year. Happy New Year's whenever you wind up seeing this. Hopefully in the future this all seems silly and none of it ever came to pass and it's all so great and wonderful. And, that'll probably happen. Did we really just record a whole video with the mic turned off? Yes, we did. Okay, that's fun. That's fun for me.